I dropped out of school, but I got my first degree at MIT. And then I went on to do my MBA in Massey. Those were all seeds planted here, in Otara.
This podcast is proudly supported by the Ōtara Network Action Committee, ōNAC, community-owned, community-driven and community-led.
Hello once again and welcome back to the We Are Otara podcast, sponsored by ōNAC. ōNAC, community-owned, community-driven, community-led. Now, we had another amazing guest. I know, it's a thing. And this guest is one of the best that I've had so far. Her name is Solo Aiono. She works with the Ministry of Health as an advisor, and as well as an amazing Otarian for over 20 odd years. And we were talking about very, very important topics such as mental health, physical well-being, so physical health as well, and just the overall mentality of just being kind to one another, and how we should, be kind to our parents and be kind to those around our community. And hopefully we can spread our message and plant a seed within you to grow out of kindness. So hopefully you're enjoying this episode as much as I did. And yeah, it's going to be a good one. So Solo Aiono, We Are Otara podcast, another amazing episode. Hope you enjoy.
So I was born in Otara, Middlemore, Capstick, and stayed here for 2 years. And then my mum took me back to Samoa for my grandparents to bring me up. So I was schooled in Samoa up until I was 13. So that's college. And then my mum came back here, and she wanted me, back into her life. And by then my late grandfather had passed. And so it was time for my grandmother to migrate over and join the rest of the family here. And excuse me, I went to high school. So I came back and stayed in Otara. High school was at Papatoe High. Actually, no, I went to Papatoe High because my mum and stepdad were staying in Papatoe at the time, so it was zoned. However, the rest of the family were here in Otara, so every week, we're here for church. My cousins went to Sir Edmund Hillary College, and so lots of interactions there, and pretty much, Otara is a big part of my life growing up. But going back to high school, went to Papatoe High for that time. I actually didn't know English when I came back, so needed an interpreter. I still remember her name, and it was the school reaching out to all the Samoans that were there at the time to try and help integrate me into this really massive new world. You hear of culture shock. Yep, got that. And sort of was there until sixth form, and didn't make it to seventh form because I was a teen mum, blessed with a beautiful baby girl. Then I guess my first job was in Otara. And so for the last 23 years, I've served Otara, working in the community. And I guess that's what I had said in my conversation with Judy, pretty much serving and being, the hands and feet to connecting our communities and our families to services that, to improve, health services, as that's where I was working in the sector that I have been blessed to be part of for the last 20 years.
Nice. You had mentioned that you came back to New Zealand after being in Samoa for quite some time. How was it to try and integrate back into New Zealand once more? Was it difficult for you to do that sort of thing?
It really was, because I don't think it was more integrating back, because, you know, I don't remember back when I was 2. It was like an introduction to a whole new culture, new world, new place, new home, and even my family as well. You know, my cousins, they all speak English. They grew up here, and so I was trying to fit in and, you know, try and make friends and things like that. So it was hard, yeah.
And I'm just because the reason why I was thinking that is because I was thinking about my parents. You know, they were just beautiful people coming from the island of Samoa and finding opportunities here. And I was just thinking about my siblings and how they went through. You know, and it comes to my next part of my question is when you came back to Otara. And you were mentioning about how it's an introduction and it was new. Was there any is there any correlations of today that are still here in Otara in terms of your upbringing? Has anything changed from when you were growing up in Otara to now?
Yeah, there's some changes. I think I can recall, you know, even though we were in our teen years, it was quite safe for us. Like the creek was like our connection point to get to where we were staying at the time down in Tyrone, and here in the mall. And when we drove up, I said to you, this is my first time in this building, whereas Cross Power, we were regulars there, you know. And I think the youth or the young people right now would never know what it was like for us back then. We would beat the feet and we get everywhere, not even buses. And that's because the community was safe. But there was a lot more to take in. It wasn't just the safety aspect of it. It's we literally were interested. Whether it's someone we meet as we walk down by, you know, through the creek, or someone at the shopping centre, like you had genuine conversations, and everyone was interested in everybody. I guess with the technology and social media, you know, everyone's doing a lot of looking down and on their phones and things like that. People are just not taking the time to just meet with someone and say, hey, you know, how's it going? Rather than being in conversation starter, like, how are you? Like, but really ask, how are you? And then go on to listen to the response and have a solid conversation. So I feel like that's not there as much. The people, I guess, in my generation, they still value that. I know when I see, you know, some of the people that went to Sir Edmund, or I'm still in contact with friends that I made in Papatoa High School. We still have, you know, solid conversations, and we're very much interested in each other's lives. We do value that. But that's kind of like the noticeable change for me. And of course, you know, growing up when Decca was there, Wickles and all those, Food Town, I think even, it's not there anymore. Like the quality, I feel like we've been robbed, you know, to not really have those available to our people, but that's okay, you know. We're still here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, I want to raise my hand and say that I'm guilty of that. I'm constantly, I have my phone right here, and I constantly look at my phone to converse with other people. But it only took for someone like Will or for Judy to get me out of that cycle where I'm talking to people, and this is the reason why I'm doing these podcasts, so I can break out of that cycle of looking down. And I'm trying to get that from my niece. You know, she's constantly on her tablet, and then I'm looking at myself going, I can't tell her off because I'm doing the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with that said, I noticed that Otara has this quote unquote technology divide, and as an IT professional, I noticed that as well. How can we as a community bring that divide closer so that we can be in par with places like in central Auckland or even the greater Auckland to be, connected technology wise or any form of social issues that that Otara comes across? How can we make that divide as close as possible so we can be in par with Auckland?
I think, and one side of it, it's a generational issue, where the divide has come through, our parents that have worked really hard to try and, get us through education. And now that we know about technology and now we have access, I think we take it for granted or perhaps underestimate the power of introducing our mātuas or, our mamas and papas to technology. I was talking to a colleague just last week, and her mum is 80, and she had one of those old, I forget the name, the block, one that just functions on calling and that. But through COVID, they've had to get her an iPhone, and she loves it. So for our mātuas can benefit from that. I think sometimes we just think they're not interested, but actually if you take the time and again, connecting them to what's available, you'll be surprised. And that can certainly bring the divide closer because then they'll feel empowered. They're not going to feel like, oh, I'm too old for this. They're never too old. Just expose them and get them to FaceTime. Like my grandma is 90 and she has an iPhone. She uses it so she knows how to go on to listen to the app. But then we also set her up with a messenger, and you can call her. And so it depends on. Sometimes she has selective hearing that she's like, ugh, don't wanna answer that. And then I'll see her and be like, how come you never picked up the call? Or I'll call through my cousin or auntie's phone. How come you never picked up the call? She goes, I never heard it. I was like, you did hear it. You just chose not to answer it. And, it's so proud for me that, my grandma who only probably went up to primary level in Samoa in her time, and didn't even make it to intermediate. And she has an iPhone. And she can use it. And she clicks on the Samoan radio app to, connect her to the news. And so, yes, the news is everything to her. But there's things that they're interested in. Introduce them to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's creating that, and I also by mentioning that, I also noticed that it's creating that generation that
bridge.
Gap. Yeah, it's bringing it together and creating a safe place for those around you. And then I noticed with my nieces, it's quite hard for them to open up.
Yeah.
Especially around our elderly who we as we grew up, for me definitely is that I can't go up to my elders because it's if I do go up to my elders, I feel like it's a weakness because they've done so much, and you want to go up to them and you go, I need what do I need to do from here, but in your back of your mind it's like, oh, it might bother mum or might bother dad. So with that said, how can we as the youth can go up to our elders and ask for that sort of help? Because I noticed that again, our youth is struggling to do that part. Yeah.
I think so. I understand very well what you're saying. I used to work for South Seas Healthcare, and I was part of the team that created and delivered and facilitated a framework called My Story. And they surveyed 100 young people at the time. as to what were the real issues in terms of communication, seeing that you've got technology that you can Google all the answers. So, 2, 3 in the morning when you're faced with whatever questions and what you're going through. And it came through that it was the connecting to those in the same house, their parents, their grandparents, and then it came down to knowing how to tell your story or to even try and articulate it. And so we were running these programs, and we had the parents as well be part of it. And there was just gold everywhere, because for the parents to realize this is where their young people were struggling and thinking, and then for the young people to hear their parents' stories, it just brought them together in such a way that all what you think of, or your premeditated views, and because as a young person you're like, oh, they're old, they won't know, they're not going to help me. All of a sudden that all was put aside and put to rest, because their parents actually went through a lot, and it was really hearty to see them being connected over history, and then go on to use that experience and the call to action to look forward and be like, we can do this better, we can have a better relationship. Dad, you just need to be patient. And the dad is like, oh man, I need to be patient. I shouldn't, shout, or I shouldn't, because this is what's important to them. Sometimes what's important to our young people is not important to us as parents. And I'm a parent, I can say that. And it's just different stages of growth at both, it's two ways. Yeah. And
I, you tend to see that often with I see it within my family. We're Samoans, and my father and mother's generation, I look at my brothers and sisters and how they interact with mum and dad, and with utmost respect, but they still have that struggle of having that conversation. Whereas that when they have their own conversation with their own children, it's so easy and so simple, because they now know what they've learned from their parents, and not realizing they made that connection, not without words or physical action. They viewed
bonded,
it. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to see that happen within our community, that sort of communication. As I often I walk around Otara, and we tend to not have that communication side of things. We have that mentality of someone has it worse than I do. How can we as a community help each other and reach a point where we can just look at each other and go, hey, do you need help? And then that help can be reciprocated to everyone else in our wonderful community. What would be your advice on how to build that relationship?
Yeah. And I think when I had said earlier, what I noticed is that there's no genuine connection. It's just to really pay attention, and that's what I mean. Rather than saying, hey, how are you? As a conversation starter, actually, how are you? And then go on to listen. Sometimes people don't even have to delve into, what's really going on in the depth. You can actually pick it up with what they're saying. And it may not be like the full story, but it may be that, oh, do you have time now? Do you want to go for a coffee and or have something to eat? And you'll find that person will feel, oh, they care. They actually took the time. Time is, it's not chasing time, but no. Time is so important. When people realize that you've given up, some of your time to speak with them, to have a conversation with them, that goes a long way. And sometimes I'm a big believer in planting the seed, and just that, even asking, how are you? and having that first encounter, they're going to walk away and you planted a seed. And it could be that they'll reach out to you if you're local, via phone, messenger, Facebook, but you sort of let that person know that, hey, it's okay if you ever, want to talk. And, I'm Christian, and I also believe in having, things drop into you, and then you're like, oh, it came to me. I think I need to contact this person, or there's a reason why I cross path with that person. So that's kind of like always, how I kind of stay in tune and connected. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I feel when I do my work here in Accelerating Aotearoa, not only on the podcast but sitting in front of reception. And I just want to say this: there is a more rewarding job than doing reception work, because especially for an organization for charity, because you never know what sort of characters come through the door, or you never know who's going to come in that door who needs your help. And when you talk to someone and the first few words were, how are you doing? It makes my day, because then they've taken the time to go up to me, a complete stranger, and go, how are you? And you go, I'm fine, and how are you? And you know that you made that establishing connection. And it's important to make that establishing connection. And if it's short-term, long-term, whatever, how it is, establishing it is just off the bat, it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling.
Oh, 100%. I'm smiling because that was my first job here in Otara at a single GP practice as a receptionist. And it's funny how you create that connection. I go on to know, all patients and families that come in, to the point where they're like, maybe a few years and, oh, how's your baby? And then sometimes they're like, when are you due? I'm like, I'm not pregnant. But like, that's how, they feel so comfortable at the space that you created. And, one time I was in Samoa with my family on holiday, and then I hear, oh, there's solo. And then I look and it's patients, and it's like, oh, they feel like family. And then I'm like, hey, and then I've had one woman, just close to me, her diagnosis out in the car park, and it's, you just don't know the value, that you're opening up by being present and by being there. It's huge, and just taking the time to like speak to someone is so important. Yeah,
absolutely. And doing over close to 20 episodes into this podcast, and it's awesome to there's a person that I interviewed by the name of Tipi Arthur. Every time when I meet him, when he comes through for a meeting, he's like, hey, Vinny, what's up? And I was like, hey, what's up? He's like, when's your next podcast? And I was like, oh, yeah, I got it coming up in the next week or so. And, and then he's like, oh, yeah, awesome, mate. And I was like, oh. Because after recording that and it went up, Tipi comes up to me and he goes, oh, that was an awesome episode, mate. And I'm like going, are you sure? And he goes like, yeah, it was an awesome episode. Don't worry about it. And just going back to what you're saying is that you never know who you're going to meet out there.
Yeah.
And it's the everlasting moment where if you make that first impression to that person, it will imprint on them. And if their kindness is imprinted in there, you will have a good moment, I swear.
Yeah, 100% agree. There's so many moments that, and that I've, sort of established and created along my journey and my pathway. And I grew. So, I did various jobs, until I came back and worked for South Seas. I started off again in the front, and fortunate enough to progress my career up to management. And during that time when people wouldn't see me, and I'll just walk past and they're like, hey, where are you now? I thought you left. And I was like, oh no, they've got me making the tea and the coffees at the back. They're like, Ep18, And some of them are like, really? Like, they shouldn't do that to you. And they're like, oh, are you? And I was like, no, I'm just kidding. They just got me doing the filing at the back. And, but, you know, they cared enough to ask. And they always ask how my kids are or how my family are. I've really been blessed, and you only get that from this community in Otara, may I add. Other places, I don't know. Like I've been to see a GP in Papatoa, and the lady looked scary, the receptionist. And she was like, take a seat. Didn't even look at me. Okay. Yeah.
You these were available baka.
Yeah. And so, really, really loved working with people. And, you know, if people are coming into the medical centre, it's because they're not feeling well. And so don't add on to that, you know.
Absolutely. And you touched upon health, and you touched upon self-sees. How vital it is for an individual to keep health in check. That's both physical and mental. You know, most times I'm guilty of it, where I tend to go, it's just a little ache, you know, but it turns out to be something that will prolong in the near future, which end up turning out to be gout, you know. So what sort of advice for those in our community, because I know we are very, very proud when in terms of admitting that sort of things, in terms of health, especially in that mental well-being section of things. What sort of advice can we do in terms of trying to reach out for our health, you know, importantly?
I think COVID has, you know, changed, or I guess reprioritized health for many people, and mental health as well. You know, COVID is a pandemic, but it was also an opportunity for health to really campaign and push out messages around for people to, you know, look after themselves and to connect them to services that were available. And whether it was kind of like heavy on COVID, I did see, you know, a lot of health messages that came out on looking after your mental health and services, and especially with the health reform now, it's all part of that, trying to redesign the system so that it's a lot easier for people to access, and also the comms to be easier for people to understand. And equity is such a huge part of that. And with Te Aka Whai Ora, like the Māori Health Authority, wanting to really leverage that and bring that up for our priority populations that tend to always, you know, miss out. And I think everyone's doing their best to get those messages out. But again, our young people that are now full of knowledge and are accessing, you know, social media, you know, it'll be really helpful for them to just connect their, you know, parents and those people. But it's a journey, right? They're going through it. Why not, you know, get someone else close to them to, bring them along and have that conversation, let them know what's available. And then it could be that that's the start of their conversation to say, oh, I'm actually struggling, you know, with my mental health. This is my thinking and this is what comes to mind. What do you think, you know, rather than it being a really hard topic, you know, to bring up. It's just, what are your thoughts? You know, what do you think about what I'm thinking right now that I'm struggling with? Yeah.
I want to share a moment with you. I have a sister by the name of Molly, and she is my comfort rock, as I like to call her. So we had a talk. This was after Dad passed away. And it was just a talk, and I didn't realize at the time that she was hurting. It was still lingering. It got to the point where she turns around and she goes, I don't feel safe. And I went, my body just went, all right, okay. I have to stop being little brother and time to be a person of comfort because she's been there for me. And I go, and she goes, what is on your mind? And those 3 words basically open a floodgate to, this is how I'm feeling. I miss Dad, and I'm going through all these emotions, and I don't know how to feel about it. And it's like, well, the first thing you need to feel about is how you're feeling now. Don't block it. Just cry, and you just see these tears come through. And just having that moment, I wanted to share that out to everyone because everyone can have that moment, even if it's a happy moment or a sad moment or anger. Anger is not bad. It's how you handle that anger. If you let it out by words and just be able to vent it out as safely as possible, then go ahead. Yeah. And just hearing what you're saying it's helpful. Yeah. So thank you for saying that.
And thank you for sharing. Because even anger, for it to come out, it's an emotion. You've created the space for it to come out, and it's better that it comes out between you and your family member or Molly, than having her, sort of having it come out in an unsafe space where it will be received, negatively, and then that will affect her or will do more harm, than any good. So the moment that you shared that, it was meant to, sort of unfold that way.
And just thinking about this, I just wish that our community can learn something like that. And not to sound like I'm just forcing it, but over time, when they do hear our story from this podcast, is that they'll think about their emotions and how key it is. It's about equal to their physical health and well-being. That their mental health is going to take them places where they'll feel safe. And it's going back to that word that I mentioned earlier, which is that safe place, and what would it look like for them in their own mindset. So when I mention safe space, what is the first thing in your mind that you think in terms of a safe space?
I think for me, in a safe space, when I hear it, it's okay. And just going back to what you were saying about creating that space, sometimes we get caught up in the complexity of trying to understand what mental health is. But honestly, I was saying to Will earlier, I'm a firm believer in keeping it simple. And it's just what's on your mind. It's, hey, how are you feeling? Or, don't get caught up in trying to be the psychologist or the psychiatrist that you're not, that I'm not. For me, it's really just letting that person know that you care, letting that person know that it's okay, and letting them know that you will support them. Because it's one thing to reveal or to tell of a story, and it's another on how to handle that and how to respond, because your response matters and how you go on from there matters. It sort of makes the way for healing or the start of the journey and the process and going to where it needs to go. So all those things, don't make it complicated for the person, Sometimes it may be just to grab a feed and sit and watch TV and that person's processing whatever they're going through. And then they'll come back. They'll come back because they know no judgment, and no questions asked. So, yeah.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Because for me, my safe space is, so I have, in my safe space, I have me, and in my safe space is a circle. And in the circle is my friends and my family members. And I'm learning how to ask out, because I tend to So I tend to shut myself off, have this tunnel vision. So I'm learning to ask my circle now. So in my safe space, I know the people that are around me that I can go, okay, if I call this person right now, they can pick up the phone and we will have a conversation. And it's creating the inner image of what your safe space should be. And that's just based on what my one looks like. So when you say keep it simple, I was like, oh yeah, I'm already doing that. I'm already going straight into it. It's like simple as that. My friends are my safety. So yeah, thank you so much once again.
It's okay.
So we're coming towards the end of our amazing storytelling journey. And I always like to leave off with our lovely viewers with an amazing quote. Would you like to share something like that to our amazing viewers?
For me, I live my life, and put in practice a lot of the values of the Bible in terms of treating others how you want to be treated, and there's so many. There's one that stands out as well, which is a Psalm 1 proverb. Tautua nei mo so manuia taiao, which I think it translates to working today for a better tomorrow. And it can be applied to health as well, because I know it's about health. Soifua ataiao. But I think you can apply that across of many other areas of your life. The seed that you plant today, talking to my children, I know it will grow and will harvest later on. They may not get it now, but they will get it later because you planted that seed. So always invest into the different, whatever you do, give it your excellence, give it your best standard, because you will be fulfilled, with the returns and the harvest later.
And hopefully the seeds that we've planted in this episode grows into something beautiful that we all know that Ōtara is capable of doing in producing beautifulness and just awe. I can't put it into words because Ōtara in a whole, you can't put a definition on it.
Oh, I know. I mean, I dropped out of school, but I got my first degree at MIT. And then I went on to do my MBA in Massey. Those were all seeds planted here, in Otara. I wouldn't get into a master's program if they didn't interview me to see if I have the capability, and that was all learned through here in our backyard. So, I wish everyone will know that where they are, don't take it that it's in vain. It's just give it what you got. It's it's gonna come out somewhere, and it's gonna be beautiful, and you're gonna get your returns because you're putting in the mahi and the work in whatever you're doing. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation.
No worries
to be here.
And once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this lovely person as much as I did, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.